Hello. It is so cool to be here with a live band, first of all. Have you guys like the band? Amazing. Love you. It's also an honor to be a part of the Verge community this year, and I'm so excited that we have this time together today to do something a little bit unusual. We get to spend the next 10 minutes practicing the art and science of time travel. Not in a fancy science fiction time machine, of course, but using the power of our minds, we will practice the art and science of mental time travel so that we can spend some time in a future that feels good. A world where we have changed some things that need to change, and we've accomplished some of our most important climate goals. And we're going to practice the art and science of mental time travel so we can become messengers for people here in the present. We can say, you know, there are some kind of strange challenges up ahead that we should be ready for, and also some amazing opportunities that we can help make happen. Before we fire up our time machines, I want to share with you 2 data points from my research at the Institute for the Future in Palo Alto that I hope demonstrate why I feel it's so essential that we make mental time travel a habit for ourselves, perhaps for our families, but definitely for our teams, our organizations, and our communities. So here are those data points. Since the start of the year 2020, there have been 2.5 million English language news stories with the word unimaginable in them. And there have been more than 3 million news stories with the word unthinkable. And of course, we live through these unimaginable events and unthinkable stories together. The early headlines with these words were about the pandemic. Then they started to be about geopolitical events. And the last couple of years, they've been most often about extreme weather and climate events. Just to put these numbers in perspective, this is a LexisNexis timeline search for how often these 2 words appear in our journalism, going all the way back to 1840. Look at that exponential surge. Look how common these words have become. We so often have been feeling shocked and blindsided by how the future unfolds, which can make us face the future with a sense of anxiety and uncertainty, maybe a sense of dread or powerlessness. But it doesn't have to be this way, right? We can face the future with confidence and hope and a sense of our own power. And to help people develop that sense of urgent optimism, at the Institute for the Future, I lead a program in future imagination leadership, where I help people develop imagination leadership skills by simulating and imagining hard-to-imagine futures. And today I'm going to teach you 2 of our foundational skills so that you can practice them here at Verge. So to start, we're going to try a little imagination experiment. It'll take just a couple of minutes. If you want, you can close your eyes if it helps you focus. So for the first part of this imagination experiment, I want you to imagine yourself waking up tomorrow morning. And I want you to simulate it in your mind as if you were almost watching a movie, or you were standing in the room, sort of out of your own body, watching yourself wake up tomorrow morning. And I'm going to ask you some questions to help you really visualize it or imagine it in detail. So where are you? It's a hotel room, or an Airbnb, or your home. What time of day is it? Is it light out or still dark? What wakes you up? Is it an alarm? Is it a loud noise in the street? Are you just excited to come to Verge and you wake up bright and early? How do you feel physically in your body? What mood are you in? What's the first thing you do? So try to get this as clear in your mind as if it had already happened and you have a memory of it. All right, so this is a pretty easy imagination exercise. Most likely you were able to come up with a vivid and detailed scenario that feels likely or plausible. You can't predict exactly what will happen between today and tomorrow morning, but you have enough information to make a really solid prediction that your brain can simulate and imagine easily. We're going to try something a little harder now. I want you to do exactly the same thing, but I want you to do it for 10 years from today. So it's 2034. And you're waking up. Now this time, you can feel free to change as many of the details to imagine maybe a world you'd like to wake up in, or a day you'd be excited to wake up to. So change as many of the details as you like, but try to make it as vivid, see it as realistically as you were just imagining tomorrow. Okay, so it's 10 years from today. Where are you waking up? Let's pick a very specific place. How do you feel in your body? What mood are you waking up in 10 years from today? What's the weather like where you are? Is there someone in the room with you? Is it your partner? Is it a pet? A new child? Change any of the details that you like. What's the first thing you do when you wake up? I'm going to give you just a moment longer. See if you can make it specific. See if you can make it vivid and detailed. Now, this is a harder imagination exercise because we don't really have as many facts about the far future. We don't have as much reliable information to say exactly where we'll be or how we'll feel or who we'll be with or what the climate will be like. So we have to fill in those blank spaces. This is a creative act to try to remember a moment that hasn't happened yet. But something really interesting happens when we do this. A moment that was previously unimaginable to your brain, in a very literal way, becomes imaginable because you have made a memory of a hypothetical future event. And your brain will treat this memory like real information. And it turns out that when we vividly imagine a future possibility, when we try to go there as if we could visit it, as if it were a place or a movie we could watch, we start to rate that possibility as more likely. The more often we travel there in our mind, the more vividly we imagine it. That has some really profound consequences for how we feel today and the actions we're willing to take. If it's a future we want, we become more likely to take actions to make that future real. And if it's a future we do not want to wake up in, then we become more likely to take actions to try to mitigate it or prevent it. So if we want people to take action, we want to increase our own motivation to stay engaged with the hard work of making a better world, it's really important to not just talk about the future, or not just to share facts about the future, but to invite people to travel, time travel to that future. Now we know that time traveling to a future changes how our brain responds to it because there's a lot of research on this topic. In fact, there have been more than 5,000 peer-reviewed scientific studies published on the topic of mental time travel this decade. So we've learned that it changes how likely we think a future is and how motivated we are to prepare for or change that future. Here are two other really important findings from the research literature. People who regularly practice the art of mental time travel are able to reduce symptoms of depression and anxiety about the future. It turns out that we train our imagination in a way that really helps us feel optimistic. We become better able to visualize the future we want. It increases our sense of agency to get to that future. And it also helps prevent us from ruminating or spinning out on negative futures or futures that we fear. We learn to decide where to travel in the future. We decide to fill in the blanks of the future so that we can imagine the futures that help us feel confident or ready or capable. So this is just a little taste of the science. If you're a nerd like me, you can go to Google Scholar and you can just type in mental time travel and pick one of these studies to learn about. I said we were going to practice the art and science, so I just want to teach you a little bit about the art of mental time travel, because mental time travel is not meant to be a fantasy escape from reality where we just go to amazing worlds where all our problems are solved. We have to decide which futures to time travel to. We have to create the worlds that we travel to in our minds. And to do that, we need to work with a certain kind of raw material. You know, every creative field has a raw material. Sculptors work with clay, programmers work with code, chefs work with food, musicians work with notes, fashion designers work with fabrics. And futurists work with a raw material called a signal of change. A signal of change is what we craft futures out of. A signal of change is a specific example of the future in a present. It's something that's real and is already happening, not a hypothetical idea. We can read a news story about it. We can see a scientific paper published about it. We can watch it documented on social media. And a signal of change is a clue that things could become different and how they might become different. I'll give you an example of a signal of change I found just last week. The University of San Diego announced that every student, starting with this year's freshman class, will have to complete a course in climate science and climate action in order to graduate. That's amazing, right? That's a signal of change. When we encounter a signal like this, we ask, what would happen if this signal were amplified? What if this action were taken at scale? So we can imagine waking up 10 years in the future in a world where every student is taking classes in climate science and climate action. I might time travel to a future where my 9-year-old twin daughters are in college 10 years from now, and they're telling me about their coursework or their project-based learning in climate action. So we look for these signals of change. They help us decide where to travel. And what I want to say to you, the most exciting thing about being here at Verge 24 is that each and every one of you, every single person in this room, every vendor, every speaker, every attendee, every member of this community is a living signal of change, right? You are all doing work that gives us a clue to how the future could be different. So what I want to invite you to do is when you meet someone here, when you hear a speaker, you run into a really cool project, use that signal of change as an invitation to time travel 10 years from today and imagine, ask yourself, what if this signal were amplified? What if this were happening at scale? What if this were incredibly common and widespread? I'm excited to be in a room full of living signals of change. I want you to have an amazing Verge and wish you happy time traveling. Thank you and good luck.